skyrocketing energy prices, grid reliability, PJM, data centers. For many, these topics were not top of mind just a few short years ago. But in 2026, we continue to hear about our ongoing energy challenges in Pennsylvania and across our PJM grid, which covers 13 states and Washington, D.C. I'm State Senator Kristen Phillips-Hill, and welcome back to another episode of my podcast, Kristen's Corner. If you look at my legislative agenda or even social media, you will know that I am not shy about calling out our neighbors to the south, specifically Maryland and Virginia, for a lot of the issues that we're currently facing in southern York County. Maryland and Virginia continue to import its electricity from Pennsylvania while shutting down baseload energy generation. And to make matters worse, Maryland and Virginia continue to greenlight data centers that require even more electricity from Pennsylvania power producers. In the middle of this battle is prime farmland in southern York County. This land has been increasingly targeted for new high voltage power transmission lines to connect power plants to data centers in southern states. However, all is not lost with our neighbors to the south. One of the leading voices to ensure that Maryland contributes its part to our regional grid is Maryland Delegate Kathy Szeliga. Now, full disclosure, the good delegate and I forged a partnership and a friendship several years ago when our constituents were negatively impacted by a proposed high voltage transmission line project called TransSource. And since then, she has been a trusted resource on issues of mutual concern along the Mason-Dixon line. So Delegate Szeliga joins us today to help us understand the fight going on in Maryland. Kathy, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much, Kristen, or Senator Phillips-Hill. Yes, we've really had some success working together and, again, forged a friendship out of that. And I really appreciate having you right across the Maryland border to have somebody that we can count on in Maryland to help us with some common sense ideas that oftentimes get lost, especially with energy policy here in Maryland. Look, there's been talk, some kind of feckless conversation in Maryland, in Annapolis, our state capital, about leaving the PJM power grid. And if we did that, Maryland, the lights would turn off. So, I want to thank Pennsylvania for keeping our lights on. We import 40% of our power today, and under current environmental and energy policies, we will have to import 80% of our power from you. So please, please do not leave PJM because we need you to keep the lights and the heat on.
Well, Kathy, I appreciate that perspective so much. And, the challenge for us is that we often, as you well know, from our TransSource battle, we not only bear the cost of those high voltage power transmission lines, we also lose our farmland. And for many of your constituents, they were in that same place because those lines weren't bringing power to you. Those lines were taking power through you down to Baltimore, Northern Virginia, and Washington, D.C. But just for our listeners here, mostly in Pennsylvania, tell us a little bit about your background. How'd you get into public office? What's your district like? If you talk to my folks in deep southern York County, that line can get a little blurry going into northern Baltimore County, but give folks a little sense of who you are and who you represent.
Thanks, Kristen. So this is my 16th year in office. I ran for office. I had temporary insanity, which my husband's like, now it's permanent. You've been there 16 years. So my district used to be along the Baltimore-Hartford line into PA, into York County. And that's how you and I met and started working on this TransSource fighting this terrible high voltage power line project. After gerrymandering, I'm a Republican in Maryland, so of course, their goal is to reduce any Republican power at all. They'd like to turn my power off, but they can't. So now I am just in Baltimore County, but still facing, Kristen, the same high voltage power line project. It's a different project, same problem. So we have a power plant in Anne Arundel County called Brandon Shores Wagner right next door. Supplies most of the power for Baltimore City and the region outside of the city. And the Liberals, Sierra Club, sued Brandon Shores because it was a coal-fired power plant. As you know, they think coal is bad. We'll differ on that. We can burn coal cleanly with all the technology we have. But nonetheless, Brandon Shores folded like a cheap suit and agreed to close, knowing full well they could not close. So now there's an agreement called an RMR. There's a fee on our bill every month to keep Brandon Shores open, to keep the lights on and keep the heat on and keep the air conditioning on. So what do they have to do? You can't not have power in a state that is trying to electrify everything. They're trying to shut down natural gas, make you buy an electric stove, an electric HVAC, an electric car. I guess they think it's like pixie dust that just arrives somewhere from heaven. But though that power is now having to backfill from Pennsylvania, thank you, Pennsylvania, to Maryland. And it's just doubling these power lines that are running through people's backyards. Imagine, I have a constituent, they have a farm that's been in the family for hundreds of years. Back in the 50s, the family member let BGE put an easement in, thinking, oh, it's for the greater good. People should have electricity. Never imagining they would end up with two giant 8-line power lines going near their house. It's just unconscionable what's going on. And for you folks in Pennsylvania, Maryland is taking advantage of you. They are making you have environmental, supposed environmental issues with producing power so we can get your power. And Westmore can claim that we're, champions of the environment. It's wrong, and we're trying to turn the corner here in Maryland.
I so appreciate the conversation, Kathy, because I have often said that Maryland is living in this green energy fantasy land, that they want to pat themselves on the back and say, look at us, we're so wonderful. Well, you're welcome, because our nuclear, our coal, our natural gas, our hydro is powering that. But you recently did an interview on WBAL radio, and it was about Maryland's energy challenges. And I think you really hit the nail on the head with how my constituents are feeling when you said Pennsylvania is tired of carrying our weight. So you've really clearly articulated the problem, but what are you seeing on your end as part of this PJM grid? I've always said, right, there are tremendous rights that you have by being part of a grid, but with rights, just like being a citizen of this great nation, come responsibilities. So how's that all playing out down in Maryland?
Well, it's challenging. The reality of Maryland's energy policies are, just smacking everyone in the face when they open their energy bill. And, Kristen, I had mentioned to you before about this local family grocery store in my district. Wonderful family. Dad started it. The mom's running it. She's, our age. Her sons that
A young
are
woman.
40 are taking over, helping her run this wonderful, beacon of hope, beacon of, the free market and capitalism grocery store. She opened her bill, it was $57,000 a month. I mean, that can of corn is going to cost you $1.50 now, because how can you pay $57,000 a month? So reality is coming home to roost. And, Pennsylvania has been such a wonderful partner to Maryland. Thank you. Thank you to, Pennsylvania residents that are footing the bill for us. And eventually you guys are going to stop giving us a break. And those bills are going to be even higher. But what are we doing? So I'm part of the Maryland Freedom Caucus, the Maryland State Freedom Caucus. We have started a multi-state energy alliance. We're working with Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia. So you guys are the only power producer. You're helping keep the lights on in all of those states. And so we are trying to support you. Please don't leave the PJM grid. Please don't do that. But if you need to put a surcharge, on Maryland politicians to tell them this is not fair to people who live in Pennsylvania to lose their farmland to high voltage power lines, to let Maryland pretend it's the land. I call Annapolis the land of make believe. They make believe that they're environmental champions, all while putting these pressures on Pennsylvania. So Maryland has Calvert Cliffs nuclear power plant. We need to expand it. But of course, lo and behold, what do they want to do? They want to put a data center there to suck all that power out instead of providing power to us so they can lower the price. So, what can we do, Kristen, to help you produce more power? Because we need you.
But, you mentioned it earlier, the Brandon Shores coal-fired plant. It was scheduled after litigation to retire. That litigation it evolved into a settlement between the Sierra Club and Talon Energy. It was delayed until 2029 because of the grid constraints that it would pose. Now, to me, the ultimate irony was, as this is in the process of being shut down, at the exact same time out in Frederick County, Maryland, a data center was being sited that would use the exact same amount of power in a year that's generated by the Brandon Shores coal-fired plant. And there seems to be this total disconnect. Maryland has an adequate public facilities ordinance law. And it says, if you're going to develop, you need to make sure you have enough roads, you have enough water, you have enough seats in schools, you have enough parks, you have all these infrastructure, but nobody down there has any requirement to figure out if there's going to be enough energy to power it. So it's 2026. That plant's closure delayed till 2029. Where will the new electricity come from when that power plant shuts down? That base load generation power plant.
Well, Kristen, Senator Phillips-Hill, you are right on. We, the Maryland Freedom Caucus members, wrote a letter to Secretary Chris Wright. We sent a letter, we sent the letter to President Trump and Secretary of Energy Chris Wright, and we've asked them to get involved. What they could do, and FERC, we've been communicating with FERC, the Maryland Public Service Commission that oversees local power. FERC is national, PJM, Chris Wright, President Trump, everyone to say, this is easy. Turn it back on. Why are they making it so complicated? Convert it to natural gas. If you're, so exercised about burning coal. By the way, don't tell the Sierra Club, but we have a giant coal shipping port in Baltimore. And where do we ship the coal? To China.
Yeah.
So China's burning coal. America, has the largest coal reserves on the planet. Largest coal reserves. You in Pennsylvania, you have Marcellus shale gas. You've got coal. Maryland has coal, some gas. We have these natural resources, but instead of saying, let's be energy independent, let's make energy cheap, let's make it plentiful, let's make it clean. We're Americans. We can do all that and we can do it well. There are those who are believing disinformation shipping our coal to China and shutting down our coal-fired power plants so that people are getting $1,000 bills every month to heat their homes and air condition their homes. And a grocery store is getting a $57,000 bill. Kristen, it's nonsense. It's nonsense. And we have to get together and break through.
I couldn't agree with you more. Maryland is similar to Pennsylvania in that we both have Democrat governors. Fortunately, in Pennsylvania, we have a Republican-led Senate that could champion issues and has championed issues, like we got Pennsylvania out of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. Maryland, on the other hand, however, still participates in RGGI. New Jersey participates in RGGI. And then you tell me, I took my breath away, a grocery store with a $57,000 electricity bill.
It's crazy. And you're right. I applaud the hard work Republicans are doing in Pennsylvania, getting the governor to pull everybody out of RGGI. So I know that your podcast listeners are smarter than the average bear, and they probably already know this, but RGGI is a hidden tax. It's a hidden tax on energy producers. So in Pennsylvania, if you join RGGI, I can't imagine you produce so much energy, what that tax would be. So they send the tax to the regional greenhouse gas, who then sends it back to you. Of course, we know what happens when money swaps hand, stuff gets taken off the top. It's a feckless, ineffective tax on energy at a time that people can't afford their energy bills. And unbelievably, Abigail Spanberger, the new governor of Virginia, is joining RGGI. While you guys have withdrawn, we have a bill. Maryland Freedom Caucus members have a bill to get Maryland out of RGGI. But in Maryland, they really take environmentalism on like a religion. So breaking through to say you're believing disinformation, we can be environmentally clean and conscious and still have coal-fired power plants or convert it to natural gas. We have more natural gas than anybody. America is full of wonderful resources, and we have people tying our hands, to not allow us to utilize them.
Oh my goodness, there's so much there to unpack. So much there to unpack. People in New Jersey actually see that RGGI tax on their bill. It literally says RGGI fee. Now, where I come from, you can call it what you want. But if it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it's a duck, right? If it's taking money out of your pocket by the government, it's a tax. So what Virginia is doing is just mind-boggling to me. Of course, the Democrats in Virginia have had the trifecta, and I think in the first 30 days, they introduced 50 pieces of legislation to raise 50 different taxes, right? So, that's insane. That's what we as Senate Republicans are trying to hold back against, because we recognize how hard taxpayers work for those dollars. And the reality is, yes, every single one of us, we want to breathe clean air. We want to drink clean water, but we also want to be able to afford to turn on the heat and turn on the lights and make things go and charge our phones and our computers and all of those things. And so I know a lot of Marylanders like to point to the fact that their state is quote unquote green, as you've noted. However, what we all know is that nothing could be further from the truth. Now, for the PJM grid, when you look at the portfolio across the grid, a third of what is powering the grid is nuclear. A third is gas and coal and solar. But on a sunny day, solar is about the same, right? It's a third. However, then you have to break it down further. You have some wind, you have some hydro, and you have some others. Now, the problem with solar, of course, is when the sun doesn't shine, it doesn't work. And the problem with wind is that If it's too windy, they shut them down. I didn't realize that until I literally was standing in the control room at PJM. They have a very narrow window in which they operate. Not enough wind, don't operate. Too much wind, not safe to operate. So in terms of reliability, in terms of putting power into the grid, it's about, they hit about 15%. When you look at nuclear, it's up above 90. So that kind of tells you. So more than 50% of our current fuel mix in the PJM grid is gas and coal. And here in Pennsylvania, our natural gas generation has increased and our greenhouse gas emissions have decreased. So it really is the point that you've made. Nobody does it better than we do in the United States of America. But that regional greenhouse gas initiative puts arbitrary taxes on both by making both coal and gas more expensive for the end user. So that person who's firing up their heater in the dead of winter, it was a pretty cold winter, those people who are going to turn on their air conditioning this summer, you know, people who have health conditions who can't be in sweltering heat. So, you know, you've touched on this, but the bottom line, so that my listeners understand what we've avoided by stopping Pennsylvania's participation in RGGI, what impacts directly are you seeing with the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative in Maryland?
What we're seeing is our unaffordable bills, and it's a tax that funds some ideology that just doesn't work. Like you said, that I too have visited the PJM office up there by King of Prussia. Oh, it is amazing, like Star Trek on steroids. The massive screens that are 25 feet tall, and they're tracking. It's just incredible ingenuity and incredible technology, and people that work there are so smart, because we don't think about, or I didn't until I went there, intermittent power. So, as they were explaining to all of us, a group of maybe 15 Maryland legislators went to visit the PJM control center there near King of Prussia. And they said, look, when solar works is, people are, when the sun comes up, right? If it comes up and when it comes up, and then it doesn't work, obviously, when it's dark. So the high use power times are when people are getting up before school and work. And again, when they come home, because you have businesses powering up for that, and you have families powering up to get there. So that's when we need the coal, the gas, the nuclear, because those alternative energy sources are not reliable and they aren't consistent. And then we get this, extra load of power from windmills and sun sometimes, that can be too much. And then again, the same thing happens in the evening. So PJM balances all of that out. But some of it's unnecessary. In Maryland, there is this incredible obsession with solar panels. Obsession. And this, where it's delivering about maybe 11 to 12% of the power that we use. And yet we've put millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars into the solar industry. And it's just never going to be as reliable and consistent as what we need. So, I don't know, Kristen, whether it's going to take a $65,000 electric bill for the grocery store and a $1,500, heating and air conditioning bill for a family home of 1,500 square feet that'll wake them up. But I think it has to be coming, because we just can't continue down this path. And RGGI is, causing a lot of this. So, you guys are not in it, thank goodness, and saving your ratepayers and saving my ratepayers. I mean, you're saving Marylanders money by not taxing your energy producers. But I think Maryland might be the best economic development engine for Pennsylvania because Democrat governors come in and raise taxes, and suddenly all our friends and family move to PA. So, maybe you should send
And
Wes
I
Moore a
actually
thank
will
you note.
send you that data because our independent fiscal office just put out a report and it talked about York County having some of the strongest population and wage growth.
Yeah.
And in large part, when things happen in Maryland that are crazy, people do flee and they come straight up Interstate 83. And we love them. Of course, we want them to make sure that they don't make the same decisions that led to the failed decisions in the state that they left. So
Amen.
we'll just leave it at that.
You can say it. Don't Maryland my Pennsylvania.
Oh my goodness. Well, you touched on this earlier. I want to see if we can dive a little deeper into it. That topic that comes up is the impact if Pennsylvania were to leave the PJM grid. And I know it's a whole other discussion, and we probably could spend an hour on a podcast just talking about that. But, our governor has floated it. Like anything else, it has its pros and its cons. I often see it debated on social media. But with that proliferation of data centers in other states that cannot generate what is needed for existing infrastructure, new homes, businesses, schools, hospitals, right? I think it's going to put a bigger burden on my constituents. And as I've said, that being part of a regional grid has benefits, but it should also come with responsibilities. So give me your sense on what it is we can do to help the Marylands, New Jersey, Delaware, those states that aren't contributing their full share to the grid, that aren't living up to their responsibility of being a grid member. What can we do?
Well, I think you guys have started moving in the right direction as far as that accountability goes. So, if my data is correct, isn't Pennsylvania the largest exporter of power in the country right now?
Um, I believe we are.
I think you are. I think I read that.
If not, we're very close to
Yeah,
it. So.
if you're not the top, you're definitely in the top three exporters of power because you're hooked up to the grid. And all of, the states like especially New Jersey and Maryland, we're so dependent on Pennsylvania power. 40% of our power is imported. And, without a change in direction in Maryland, estimates that we'll need 80% of our power to be imported from other states, and the only people really producing are Ohio and Pennsylvania. So, having that discussion with the leaders in those states, and Pennsylvania saying, look, we're not going to penalize our own residents to provide you power so you can power a data center. Or, there's this big energy ball. What's at the National Harbor, the governor of Maryland is investing $10 million of our tax dollars for this big ball, round sphere, energy, something sphere. I'm sorry, I can't think of the name of it at the top of my head. This is a tourist attraction that is a giant energy consumer. So, hopefully that your governor, Josh Shapiro, can work with Governor Wes Moore. They're both Democrats. I think they're both running for president. This could be a great opportunity for Josh Shapiro, your governor, to really get a leg up on Wes Moore and say, look, we cannot keep charging our residents for your failed policies and using up our farmland. Kristen, this is the huge thing about TransSource. These power lines, it is in Maryland a corrupted system because the utilities are paid to put up these power lines, and then they get 9 to 11% interest on them forever. How would you like to get 9 to 11% interest on your portfolio forever?
And it's
So,
crazy. And you know, this is why we fought so hard, because especially for us, we were not only going to have to pay the cost of those lines going in through our people's land being taken out from under them, but then they would charge the cost of those lines in Pennsylvania to send that power down the road. That would be reflected back on our bills. And so for the first time, what was so unusual about TransSource was it was the first project contemplated by PJM to reduce costs in Maryland, Northern Virginia, and Washington, D.C. So prior to that, every other high voltage power transmission line project was about congestion, not being able to get power to the places that needed it. For the first time, that TransSource project was intended to reduce the cost of power down there, reduce the cost, raise our cost, and do that for the benefit of people who have elected officials who've not had the courage or the political will to do the right thing. Lord have mercy on us, right? And that was just, it was absolutely, absolutely insane. And, you know, I think we both agree that Maryland has not been a responsible participant of PJM. And it's not just Maryland. Again, it's Virginia, it's New Jersey, it's other states. And you were absolutely correct. I pulled the data to look at it. And in our net exports have grown exponentially. And we are the top electricity exporter in the country.
yeah, I thought, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
yeah,
Pennsylvania.
yeah,
And you're right. I think, in Maryland, the Public Service Commission, you all have a little different structure for
we
overseeing
do.
that. In Maryland, it's the Public Service Commission, and we have something called the People's Council, which is supposed to stick up for us,
Yep.
ratepayers. The People's Council is supposed to be at the Public Service Commission when they're adjudicating these projects and rates and all that stuff. And they're supposed to be sitting at the table saying, my first concern is how much your gas and electric bill is going to cost. Well, about, I don't know, 6 years ago in Maryland, they passed a bill, of course, party line, that said the PSC now has to consider environmental impact and cost. So now the People's Council, who's supposed to stick up for us and our ratepayers, are saying, well, what's the climate change outcome for this project? Oh, and then secondly, how much is it going to cost you on your utility bill every month? So, luckily, I think I'm hopeful, Kristen, we can turn the corner with a new president who's focused on energy independence, with the new Secretary of Energy, who's focused on reliable, efficient, and cost-effective power. Hopefully we can make some changes at the national level that will incentivize states like Maryland to get back in the game and produce your own power. Look, it's great for your economy in Pennsylvania. You're doing great exporting power, and it's great jobs, great money, great things for the state of Pennsylvania. And that's why your economy is growing and ours is not.
Well, Kathy, all I can say is you are certainly fighting the good fight, not just for your constituents, but really for all the people of Maryland. And um, we need partners in this regional grid. And so my hope is that you and your colleagues will prevail and be able to do the right thing. And I certainly appreciate you joining me for this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to all Pennsylvanians. We appreciate you. And I have a friend that said, why do you all call it PA? What are you, too lazy to say the word Pennsylvania?
It
And
must be a Pennsylvania thing because they call me KPH. So maybe we just like abbreviations
I
up
don't
here.
know. I don't know what it is, but I thought it was clever because we all in Maryland just say PA. It's in PA. You
That's
don't
right.
say MD, but
No,
thank
no, no, we don't. But we certainly do. We certainly do appreciate that we have elected officials to work with over the line like you and many of your colleagues that
And
you
I
work with.
appreciate you, Senator Kristen Phillips-Hill. We have a great friendship. I look forward to more years of that. And if anybody wants to follow me, my website is Maryland Kathy with a K and Kathy 4MD. Are all my social medias are Kathy 4MD or Maryland Kathy. And tune in to stay up to date if you're not an expat of Maryland that lives in PA, certainly we're working together to make the region better. Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you. And thanks for sharing where folks can learn more about your work and the incredible efforts that you're taking on in Maryland to help not only with farmland preservation and bolstering our grid, but so many other issues. And that's it for this episode of Kristen's Corner. Today's guest was Maryland Delegate Kathy Szeliga. Thank you for tuning in. For more information, you can always check out my website at senatorkristen.com. This is KPH signing off, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon.